Marcel, welcome to our Diversity and Inclusion Q&A initiative. We are really excited to have you on board this month to discuss your experience within the realms of diversity and inclusion. I know you've been in the industry for over 17 years. You're really passionate about people, leadership, growth, culture, and of course, diversity and inclusion topics. So I'm really looking forward to discussing your experience in building inclusive cultures, the importance of this, and I really hope that from our conversation, it's going to inspire others to make a change or to start advocating diversity more or just be more conscious of it. So it really is to try and inspire more individuals to get involved. Welcome, Marcel.
Thank you, Ellie. It's a pleasure being here.
It would be great if you could please share a little bit more about yourself and also why diversity and inclusion is important to you.
So in terms of my career, who I am, I started out as a web developer back in 2003. I joined a company called the Yellow Pages, and I worked there for 9 years. And then I joined QXL, which is an online auction. I stayed there for a year. It was a very small company. And then I joined Trustpilot in 2013 as a front-end developer and quickly got into becoming a tech lead. And at that point was where I really started getting into management and later transitioned into becoming an engineering manager. And now today, I changed to working for Planday, and I'm a director of engineering. Around 6 years ago, I got my first experiences around diversity and inclusion and what it actually means, because at that point, I was working for Trustpilot, and Trustpilot was one of the first company I joined that really had a truly great experience around diversity and inclusion, because we actively looked for people from other countries, other races, religion, sex, age. And we did it with a conscious mindset that they would enrich the company even more. And little did I know at that point that it actually turned out to be true. Coming into work every day, feeling super excited, engaged, motivated to do the daily work. And also the product and everything was interesting. And of course that helped. But what really made the day perfect for me was that there were so many interesting conversations to be had with my fellow employees, always interesting things. And we had these Danish lunches, we call them Danish lunch, and which would be, so everybody who was not from Denmark, and there was a lot not from Denmark who couldn't speak Danish at that point because we flew them in from all over the world. Everybody who was up for it could join the Danish table at lunch. Then all the Danes would only speak Danish to them. And initially they didn't get a clue. They didn't understand anything of what we talked about. But then slowly they learned. We would talk about the Danish culture, the Danish history, and stuff like that. And then in turn, what happened is they shared a little bit about their country culture or their backgrounds. And it's, you know yourself, when you've been on vacation, you've traveled abroad, overseas, right? You feel so full of energy or full of life when you get home from vacation. It's because you've been introduced to a different culture, a different language. And it's kind of some of the same feelings you get when you work in a company where diversity is high. It's interesting because my first experiences working in an IT company was far from diversity and inclusion oriented. It was actually the opposite. I'll dive into that a little bit later. But it dawned on me at that point that we're really onto something. And I guess a lot of other companies who've done it years before that already knew the benefits of getting it. But it's only within the last few years that my eyes have really been open towards the actual value, like the concrete value that you get from having a big, diverse workforce.
I would love to know from your own experience what you feel are the benefits of having diversity in the workplace.
I think diversity is super important because it makes everything a little bit more enjoyable. Coming to work, interacting with your colleagues. You get so many interesting stories from all the different people based on different cultures, the different language, race, religion, sex. I mean, everything just comes into play and gives you so much more value. Of course, having a good social bonding on your workplace, having people you can identify with, people who can challenge your opinions, your views, That is in itself important. But also having the diverse workforce that we have also on Planday, it gives you better results, bottom line. I'm not saying that because I've read it somewhere. I'm saying it because I've felt it, I've seen it, and I'm dead sure that the more diverse and inclusive we become, the better results we will see, bottom line. So that's why I'm actively pursuing this within my role in Planday also. It is super important that we do all these things in order to secure a diverse recruitment, because in the recruitment part, it's the first time a future employee kind of gets acquainted with Planday. And at that point, if we don't have a diverse approach to them, we just tend to scare off a lot of people. And that's super important potential that we could have gotten, but we didn't get, because they might have read our job description and decided, no, it's not really me. For women, a lot of job descriptions that are very focused on performance or bottom line results tend to be a bit scaring for them, right? And I don't think a lot of people, maybe today more, care about that and think about how to write their job descriptions. But just a few years back, a lot of people had no clue about this. And it was written by a lot of men because it's a male-dominated business, and it still is today, even though the numbers have aligned, become a little bit better towards the female gender. But I still think it's a thing that you have to fight consciously. You have to be aware of how your tone of voice, how you phrase your job descriptions, and what it is you're looking for, how to describe it in a way so it becomes interesting, inclusive, instead of very fact-based, which we see a lot of job descriptions have today. And I'm not a saint myself. I've also fallen victim to these traps, right? Especially if you're a little bit stressed or you have to write something in a hurry, you tend to forget about these small, subtle things. But it's really important to have a process in place that forces you to think about these things.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I have to say that if you're thinking of diversity as a business, it has to be consistent across everything you do, right? So job descriptions, your content on your website, your interview process, it just has to be so consistent, and you have to always think about it and have it at the forefront. And I always say that if diversity and inclusion is a goal of the business, the goal should be that it's never enough, because then you're continually working and churning towards getting diversity and inclusion. Sometimes if you have a certain number or a certain target, you hit that, maybe then you go into neutral, you start forgetting the things you should be putting in place to achieve diversity. On the other side of things, what would you say are the negative effects of an environment lacking diversity?
I believe you would get less creativity. You would get a more poor ideation process, in the sense that you would become stuck in old routines. I know I'm probably generalizing a lot when I'm saying this. And then I'm not, because I honestly, I've felt it, I've seen it. I've worked in a company that got stuck in old routines. We just did what we always did. And it was business as usual. Not a lot of discoveries, not a lot of creativity and ideation, because we were all in the same segment, males 35 to 50, almost same hobbies and interests, right? And in the beginning, it's super interesting. You bond immediately, right? But what happens is that you burn out really fast. But you don't burn out if you have a lot of diversity and a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people from different backgrounds. And that could be backgrounds both culturally, geographically, but also educationally. I mean, there are tons of different parameters that come into play.
How important is it for companies, managers and teams to publicize their commitment to diversity goals?
It's really important that you do some conscious thought around how your company brand, how your company positions itself towards diversity and inclusion. You need to put quite a lot of energy in shaping your company's vision externally and putting it out there, be it your company website, be it your job ads that you put out, anything really that you do. The more you focus on having a good approach towards diversity and inclusion, the better people will recognize themselves and their own values in your company, the more you do the other thing, the more you narrow down your focus to something super specific, the less broader group of people you actually hit, and the less people will identify themselves with your company. I think honestly, it's very basic when you think of it like this, but apparently a lot of companies still haven't figured out how or why it's important to do it.
Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to diversity and inclusion, that's for sure. And like I mentioned earlier, it's having that mindset that it's never enough, but publicizing the things you've been doing to drive diversity, to drive inclusion, but doing it for the right reasons as well, I think, not just doing these things because it sounds good to potential people who can join the business, but having this at the core of your values, you know, the core of the culture, I think is so important. And people will sometimes see through that if the diversity is forced. Do you agree?
You're absolutely right. Diversity and inclusion is a buzzword that a lot of people are reading about these days. And you yourself put up a lot of videos and conferences around these topics. And as a company, if you think that you're in safe land by just doing some good texts and putting out some good articles around diversity and inclusion, but your company in itself is not going to back that up,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to work in the long run, because it's actually going to do more damage than good. Then, because if someone were to join your company because they felt like this company really feels like they have diversity and inclusion around all the things that I find are important, and then they join the company and they see that that's not the case. They were actually just trying to make themselves look better than they were in the reality. That will, I think, potentially hurt the company even more, because the employee might feel a little bit cheated here, which is honestly what they've been, right? And I think that's the hard part of diversity and inclusion. The hard part is doing that change within the company, and it needs to come from the top. It does. You need to have a C-level group, or your CEO and CTO, and like everybody up top needs to buy in to why this is important to practice. Why is it important for us to have this approach? And I guess if you can't get them to buy in on this, it's probably not going to happen. You're probably not going to change a lot of things. But that's also why I agree with you completely. It needs to be the top management in the company that buys in to the reasons of why is it so important that we are diverse and that we include our people even more than we've done previously in everything that we do. I think I could sum it up to having a people-centric approach to everything you do. Yeah. It's the people in the company that adds value. It's not the product. You might think it's the product or the revenue. You earn a lot of money, but it's the people who do all of this for you. And if you have the right approach towards getting the right people, nurturing your people, making them feel comfortable, motivated, empowering them, giving them ownership, then you'll get the true value. And then all the other things will come over time.
For sure. I am aware of this really great quote, and it's culture eats strategy for breakfast. So I think that really like embodies what you're saying. It's the people, it's the culture. You can have the best strategy in the world, but if you don't have the ideas, the passion, the ambition to drive it, what's the point? And I really hope that we get to the point where we don't necessarily have to pitch our case to the C-level to get buy-in, right? Where it should just become the norm and just something that is always at the forefront. But like I said, still got some work to do. But thanks so much for sharing insights on that, Marcel. How does the current diversity look in your team now at Planday?
So Planday is actually a super diverse company, more so than I thought initially when I applied for the job at Planday. So it's really surprised me. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that Planday is truly a people-focused company, and it comes from the CEO, and it trickles down, and everybody buys into it. I think the first two all-hands meeting we had with the CEO, we have one every month where he goes and talks about some of the important things for Planday, what we're doing. Both these meetings, he would constantly mention why our focus is on the people and why it's so important that we empower each other to do greater work every day. And that I mean, that just resonates so well with my belief. In Planday, we have gender breakdown of 60% males and 40% females. And it's in a company where we are a little above 200 employees in total. So I think that's truly diverse, at least according to gender, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of age, we're also pretty widely spread. In terms of country background, cultural background, we have, I think, above 30 different nationalities in Planday at this point, from 200 people in total.
You touched on, of course, if you go into a business, they say they're diversity and inclusion advocates, and you get there and it's not the case. But for you, I guess, even more so, you've been blown away by the diversity in all of these different forms that they have.
That's true. I really have. It's so great. I mean, every time I mention it to someone, they already have an idea about what we should do or what we might not be doing enough of. So it's not like I have to fight a battle. It's just start mentioning something, get the ball moving, and then let's execute on it. That's also what I mentioned initially. It's so refreshing working in a company where there's not very far from idea to execution. So that means that I'm feeling empowered to do a lot of change around diversity and inclusion myself. But I don't really have to in Planday. That's the fun thing about it, right? Because they're already so diverse, and the whole company vision involves people and being inclusive in everything that we do. So I'm really fortunate in that area.
How have you amplified the voices of women and diverse minorities in your teams and organizations?
I have been an engineering manager for 3 years, and I've had a number of women under me in some of my teams. And I remember a few of them specifically that had a hard time initially when they came in, and especially in terms of the whole career development part. There tends to be subtle differences between how men and women tackle those areas. Mm. Whereas the stereotypical wording would be that men are very focused on getting this new career promotion, very focused on the results. And women are more having a cautious approach, questioning things a little bit more. And I definitely think I saw that in my time also. So I did help a few in my company trying to be a stronger voice for them because I knew they were kick-ass developers. And I needed to set an example and make them shine a little bit more. I have a specific scenario where I did a Toastmasters club in Trustpilot at that time. And there were a few people who were very scared of doing public speaking. And they attended this internal Toastmasters club. And after they were there for 3 or 4 times, they started attending conferences, and some of them started doing presenter gigs in small areas, gatherings, events, stuff like that. And today we have, I think, a handful of really strong women, specifically in Trustpilot, who are strong advocates for women in leadership. Trustpilot has a movement called TWIL, Trustpilot Women in Leadership. I was also a part of that, not an active part in the same sense as some of these really strong women who work there, but it's so rewarding to follow them in their journey and to help them. And also there have been situations where they've been put in boxes and I needed to help them get out of this box. But I think I've done my fair share of help towards the people that I manage in my teams for getting the best potential out of what they could become in their career. Not saying that I'm a saint or a hero or anything, because I'm not. I've just done my job more or less and had an inclusive approach towards managing people in my teams instead of having biased opinions, because it's very easy to develop biased opinions around culture, religion, gender, ethnicity. It's scaringly easy. So you have to constantly fight that bias, which also very much takes place when you screen people. If you're a hiring manager, you have to conduct an interview with people. A lot of people tend to have these biased or unbiased, but it's actually both biased and unbiased. It's both preconceptions around who they would fit with in the company. And then they do this selection process subconsciously. And that's a thing you have to fight. And I believe that's something worth spending a lot of time on, trying to fight this unconscious bias.
Have you got any advice for overcoming unconscious bias? What did you do to fight that?
There are a number of things you can do in order to try and fight unconscious bias. One thing is acknowledging the fact that you have unconscious bias. I've even read and seen and heard about recruitment platforms who give you the candidate and then they remove the picture and they remove the name and they remove the nationality. So all you get is a resume, cover letter, and a CV. And then you have no chance to actually trigger this unconscious bias around, is it a woman, a man, how old are they, where are they from in the world? And I think that's interesting. I've never tried it myself. What I've also done and are doing now in Planday also is that whenever I get someone who does not represent the same gender, age, country that I do, I always try to immediately think, this is cool, because that's an opportunity to get to know someone from a different culture, a different religion, or different race, or different gender. So I try to, if I can, diffuse my unconscious bias by forcing myself to say, that sounds really cool. Even though there might be a small voice in the back of my mind that says, nah, there's something bad around this. But I mean, you just have to fight that. We all have it in certain scenarios, in certain points, right? We all have it, unfortunately. But you just need to try and fight it. Everybody needs a fair chance.
Definitely. I feel like unconscious bias is the devil on our shoulder, like constantly whispering in our ear. But you're so right. Acknowledging it, realizing it, and moving on from it is a big thing. What would you say are your top tips for establishing and then nurturing a diverse and inclusive culture?
Some of the things that I was a part of and I think worked really well was we empowered our employees a lot with taking decisions within the teams, within the different groups of people that we had. We had a lot of events internally. It could be lightning talks where we had people come up and talk for 10, 20 minutes about whatever was on their mind, more or less. And some of these lightning talks was around their background, their childhood, their country they came from, which was really interesting and rewarding to hear and see people come up and open up like that towards us in the company. I think also you need to spend time coaching and guiding your people, delegating them responsibility and giving them ownership of taking decisions. Doing that proactively will be very rewarding because you will end up spending less time on course adjusting or micromanaging people, which we don't want to do. It's a very nasty word, micromanagement, in my book. So giving them ownership of decisions is something that really nurtures culture. I think some people might hear this as being far-fetched when I say it, but I honestly mean that because I've done that for the last 5 years, and we've seen awesome results. If you have this preconceived idea that top-down or hierarchical decision-making is the way forward still, I think you're wrong at this point. It's more bottom-up. Of course, there's something that goes top-down, but it's more bottom-up. It's empowering your people, giving them a strong voice. Then you get the good ideas. When they feel like they're empowered, they get ownership of taking decisions, and you teach them the tools of how to come up and figure out how to come up with a good decision for doing a product change or solving an issue. It scales much better than some boss up top telling you how to do stuff, but it also gives you much better results. And it strengthens the culture within your company. People feel more empowered, and that's something that will benefit to having a stronger culture in your company also.
Do you feel like we need more males who are advocates on diversity and inclusion topics?
It's super important that males back up around this, especially the ones who are high up in tech. companies or in the senior management, that they start putting words on why it's important for them, that they start advocating for more diversity, more inclusion within companies. I'm only addressing the fact of males versus females. There are a lot of other aspects on this.
Of course.
I'm definitely aware about that, but that's just one of the things that came to my mind when you asked me the question, because I've had a lot of experiences previously with men, specifically higher up, who kind of brushed it aside a little bit and thought like, yeah, it's kind of one of those secondary goals that we'll probably never get to. But it isn't. It's actually primary. It should be a primary focus for any company to have a strong voice and a strong process around how to secure inclusion and diversity in their company.
With that in mind, what can men do to help improve diversity and inclusion in the workplace?
Speak more openly around the benefits of having a focus on diversity and inclusion. Make sure to empower your teams to ask questions. Be more curious in general. Have specific topics around diversity and inclusion on your management meetings, on your agenda. Ask yourself in your leadership team, are we doing enough to secure a good diversity in our workforce? Have we done enough? Is it clear in what we write on our websites, on our job descriptions, that we are looking for a diverse set of people to come join us?
What mistakes have you seen companies make that have had a negative effect on diversity and inclusion or appealing to more diverse minorities?
Once in a while, when I go on different recruitment platforms, because I'm also the hiring manager in Planday, I tend to read about blogs, articles, and also read a lot of job descriptions from competitors and stuff like that. And I do still, to this day, stumble across job descriptions that specifically mentions he and specifically mentions things that just pigeonholes people into such a small segment of people who reads it and says, wow, that fits me. I'm just going to apply. And I think it's just silly. As a company, why would you narrow your own opportunities to get good talent? And I think if any recruiters out there or hiring managers are listening in and seeing this, I mean, they need to secure a process around thinking about these things. They need to be sure that when you write your job descriptions, you need to make sure you don't make these stupid mistakes of making it super gender specific or super results focused. Of course, there needs to be a section around what are the things you want people to be able to do when they land in the job, right? But there are a million different ways you can write this where it's not going to be scary or super performance focused. So people need to be a little bit more creative in how they write their job descriptions. I'm aware I'm generalizing a lot because there is still a lot of companies who do an excellent job.
Yeah.
And I'm still inspired daily by reading some of these job descriptions online. And I steal with arms and legs when I can see there's a good thing. I steal it, change the wording a little bit, and then use it for myself. And I think that's nothing wrong in doing that.
No, we have to take inspiration from others. I'm really interested to hear from a mouse perspective. Why do you feel there's a lack of women in tech still?
My immediate answer would probably be that it's very male-dominated industry to this day still. And also, it is an industry where there's a lot of focus on performance and results in many companies. And this is something that we need to be better at collectively. I think a lot of companies out there can learn from having a different view on how you manage your employees, how you set expectations, how you conduct yourself at work, how you speak to your people, right? To give you an example, if you have a boss who's very vocal, who tends to sometimes explode or go in a tantrum about if you didn't do your job properly, right? If he goes to a guy and complains and explodes up and becomes furious about a thing, a lot of guys would probably be able to either brush it off or yap back at him, and then after that would be done. But it tends to work a little bit different with some women, where they would take much more offense by it. I'm not trying to generalize because I also know a lot of women who would just give him straight back. And I think that's just, it's awesome. But But I think if we do have to generalize for 1 second, it is that it can scare off a lot of women from joining the tech industry if they feel or hear that the industry is super performance focused, results focused. There's a harsh tone. Not saying that there is a harsh tone in the industry, because I don't feel like there is. The last 8 years of my professional work life have been wonderful in that sense. I've been fortunate enough to work in companies where we had a very inclusive approach towards how we communicate to each other, how we solve indifferences. Sure, there could be arguments once in a while. Rarely we had an argument, but I mean, I can count on my hand how many times there have been an argument where people shouted at each other. Within 8 years, it's happened maybe 2 or 3 times for me. And if you are working in a place where this happens on a regular basis, or where you are actually scared of your boss because you know your boss can get a tantrum or a fit if you didn't do a specific thing the right way, that's just intimidating. It's intimidating to men, it's intimidating to women, but I do tend to think that women feels a bigger impact from these types of men at power who react so strong in this way. That might be an explanation for some of it. I'm not going to proclaim that I'm a diversity and inclusion expert.
We have to make our environments just quite warm and welcoming for all genders, all ages, all ethnicities, any type of diversity, right?
Yeah, and it's super important. And I mean, I can't stress it enough. It needs to happen at the highest level in the company.
Yeah.
That's where it all starts, and that's where it all ends. Because if you can't get it right up there in the top, everything will fall below it. You can have the best people working as middle layer management, and they will just constantly fight and hit their heads against a brick wall if their boss cannot see the value in doing it the right way. Again, I think for me, at least in my career going forward, that's going to be one of the things that I will test people for rigorously. That is their ability to be inclusive, their ability to have empathy, to feel empathy. It might sound weird that I'm saying it like this, but having empathy, having a high EQ, a lot of people talk about this EQ. I think that's the higher up you are in the ranks, the more important it becomes that you have it and you practice it. And being honest, being transparent about what you do, super important. All of these things.
Yeah.
But I'm preaching to the choir here, and a lot of people already know this. It's not rocket science, right?
What for you is the single greatest piece of advice that you can share when it comes to diversity and inclusion?
I think you have to be tolerant. You have to embrace difference in general, and always look at yourself first before you judge others. I think if you can live by those rules or practice those rules more every day, that is probably a good advice for becoming better at diversity and inclusion.
Thank you for sharing, Marcel. Again, really appreciate your time and all of the insights that you've shared.
I think this has been really interesting, and it's a pleasure talking with you about this topic.